On behalf of Dwaraka Das, Govardhan Das Vaishnav College, the Department of Tourism and Travel Management welcomes you all for today's webinar in connection with the World Food Safety Day. The webinar title is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. Today's speaker is Ms. Preetha R. She has finished her BSc Food Science and Management in MOP Vaishnav College. She did her food research from London Metropolitan University. She did her internship in Iceland Supermarket on Food Hygiene Department. She is a research scholar who is doing on Food Science Management. I welcome Ms. Preetha to the webinar.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Preetha?
Yeah, thank you so much. Hello?
Yeah, you can start the session.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So now I'm gonna get you guys into the introduction to the HACCP, that is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. First of all, HACCP is an important part of the food safety. Food safety refers to handling, preparing, and storing food in a way to best reduce the risk of individuals becoming sick of foodborne illness, that is all caused by food poisoning. In foodborne disease is an illness which results from the spoilage of contaminated food, pathogen, bacteria, virus, or parasites that can contaminate food. Like you all must be aware of the norovirus, which actually caused a death of pretty irate in the US because of food poisoning. So 5 food safety rules
Ms.
are...
Preetha, sorry to interrupt. I'm very sorry to interrupt. If you could be loud, still more louder, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So the basic 5 food safety rules are: you have to keep clean and separate raw and cooked food, because when they both are together, the bacteria from the raw food will get into the cooked food and it will cause food poisoning. And you have to cook thoroughly the food, or else because of the temperature difference, the bacteria might continue growing in the food. And keep food at safe temperatures, because when the food is stored in a normal like room temperature, and then when it's cooled down completely, you have to transfer it to the fridge if you're gonna store it, or else the hot and the coldness of the thing of the temperature will actually not kill the bacteria, and will help it grow because of the wet components. And you have to use safe water and raw materials, because safe water ensures that you the what people mostly don't know is use safe water as normal water or mineral water has lots of bacteria in them. So always use safe water, and raw materials you have to always wash them before use. And prevention of hazards in food is basically like 3 types: physical, chemical, and biological. Physical hazards, they can be described as foreign bodies. Physical hazards are visible objects, both large and small, which are in the food. These could have been introduced in some way, or they may are already part of the food. Example, bones. They pose a threat to the consumer of the food, who may cut their mouth, break teeth, or choke on the object. In a fish processing operation, physical hazards to consider include metal, nails, staples, nuts, bolts, or glasses, plastics, or flakes of paint, air, jewelry, buttons. So you can ask me, where do these physical hazards come from? In a way, they are brought in with the fish, or brought in by the staff, visitors, contractors lying around the factory. And chemical hazards. Chemical hazards are often not obvious to the naked eye, but small quantities can render food unsafe to eat. If a consumer were to eat chemically contaminated food, they could typically burn their mouth and throat or poison themselves, causing vomiting or death. So, for example, in a fish processing operation, chemical hazards to consider include cleaning chemicals used on site and processing chemicals, example sodium metabisulfite for prawn dipping, maintenance chemicals like lubricants and greases, and contaminated water for private supplies, medication given to farmed fishes, diesel in or on fish from boats, and insecticides, pesticides, and fungicides used in pest control, and biological hazards. They are also not obvious to the naked eye, and very small numbers can render food unsafe to eat. If a consumer were to eat biologically contaminated food, they could typically suffer from a nasty bout of sickness and diarrhea. In worst case scenario, consumption of biological contaminated food may lead to permanent disability such as blindness or even death, I guess. So, for example, in the same fish processing operation, uh, pathogenic bacteria. They are commonly called as food poisoning bacteria and molds, yeast, and foodborne viruses. So, for example, yeah, the same norovirus, salmonella, E. coli, and everything might cause a biological hazard. I think the next thing is responsibility for food safety. So these people are responsible for food safety, the producer or the grower. For example, if you take a fish marketer, so they have to grow their own fish or get fish from the sea, and they have to be very careful of not to not to make any contact with the bacteria to the fish, and then manufacturer. Manufacturing might be done in different ways. So you have to be careful not to get on the bacteria to the fish. And while distributing, you are packaging and everything. So the distributor might also be in contact with the bacteria, and that transporter, retailer, and consumer. The consumer is us. So we have to make sure that we clean the fish properly before having it. So the industry responses. The industry should teach for this. If you take an example for a milk company like Arvin and everything, Arvin, Amul, and everyone. So they have to educate the consumer about the food products in and when is the expiry date and stuff like that. So that they can get their hand onto the so the consumers get their hand onto the food safety system. And HACCP and food safety programs for all sectors is a compulsory thing for any food-based companies. So how are these hazards controlled within a fish processing operation? It is called as hazard analysis, is used to identify these potential threats to the food. Once the hazards have been identified, hazard analysis put control in place which will either prevent the hazard from occurring in the first place or eliminate the hazard altogether, reduce the hazard for a safe level. The hazard analysis system is very flexible and can be adapted to many different circumstances. For example, it can be used on individual products or process or parts of the operation common to many different products or processes. Hazard analysis is a systematic methodological approach which ensures attention to detail and guarantee your product to produce a safe product every time. Is hazard analysis the same for all business, you may ask? If you are a primary processor handling raw material and filleting and packaging it, the number of hazards is limited. Therefore, the number of control will be fewer than a secondary processor who is hot smoking their fish already for direct consumption. In a latter case, you will need to look in more detail at the process as there will be more control points. The hazard analysis of your operation is the first step in putting a full food safety system in place. The full system is called hazard analysis critical control point. So, this is a full form of HACCP, that is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. So, what hazards can enter the product? That is what I explained to you before. That is physical, biological, and chemical. So, when do these hazards occur? So, these hazards occur when we when we do not take proper care of the food, like when during manufacturing, during distribution, even while consuming. If you don't clean the product properly, then hazards might occur. So how can we control or eliminate these hazards? That is only when you follow the food safety guides, that is HACCP, while manufacturing, distributing, consuming, and everything, you can eliminate these hazards. So HACCP is a food safety management system. It aims to identify the hazards that are likely to occur at any stage in the food supply system chain, that is during manufacturing, consuming, distributing, and stuff, and put into the place control that will prevent them from handling. It is logical and covers all stages of food production from the growing stage to the consumer, including all the intermediate processing and distribution attributes. So, HACCP originated in the 1960s in the US. It was a joint collaboration between NASA, the Pillsbury Corporation, and the US Army laboratories, who were trying to produce completely safe food for the astronauts to eat on space missions. But they realized they couldn't do this from and product testing alone. So they developed a system which enabled them to a certain level, which controls were critical for food safety. This then guaranteed the food would be safe for the astronauts to eat. This was the first development of a preventive quality assurance approach. So Pillsbury claimed was what Pillsbury thought about the HACCP system. They came as close to 100% assurance as possible that food products would not be contaminated with pathogens, and they needed control over raw materials, environment, and people as early in the system as possible. So that's why they train each and every employee in the factory to follow all the codes, safety codes. So for for understanding food safe HACCP, you need to know what exactly is food safety and low risk and high risk foods. Low risk foods include any food which will be cooked before it is eaten, which will kill bacteria present. Example, raw food. Any food will not support bacteria, for example, dry foods, ambient stable foods, foods with high level of sugar or salt. Example, if you pickle a food, like we use pickles in our houses which can be stored for a long time, and which are, if you use more oil or salt or sugar, they do not get corroded easily. So those foods are all low risk foods. And high risk foods include which do not require further processing, reheating, or cooking before being eaten. Examples, smoked fish or raw crabs which are dressed and just eaten. For example, sushi. Those which will support food poisoning bacteria, example, dairy foods and sandwich spreads. Because if you use the same spoon again and again without washing, or if you spread the spread on the bread and then use again the same bread, they all are high risk. So benefits of operating HACCP. HACCP is a proactive system, which means it predicts in advance that might be a food safety problem and put some sort of control measure in order to cancel out the problem. This means it is very cost effective as fewer problems actually occur, product losses are reduced, and resources in terms of time, staff, and money become focused on critical areas. All food companies are now required by law to have HACCP in place. So, looking at how the product is named from start to finish, and step by step identifying possible hazards, deciding at what step they are likely to occur, and pulling in controls to prevent them. Deciding which of these controls are absolutely critical to food safety. Setting a limit from safety for the operations of these critical controls. Monitoring these controls to make sure that they do not exceed food safety limit. If they do exceed, it might be a hazard. Identifying the corrective action if something goes wrong. If you don't identify a cure or correction within a minute, within a day or so, it might cause all the bacteria and stuff. Documenting the requirements and recording all findings as the product are reduced. You have to document each and every step in a HACCP program, or else it might cause a confusion within the product and the employees might differ, and ensuring that the system works efficient through regular reviewing of performance and auditing. If you want to ensure that the system works efficient, you of course you need to review it regularly and keep on testing new stuff to come up with new plans for every product. So the 7 principles of HACCP. So the conduct to conduct hazard analysis, addressing each process point, the potential hazard is listed down followed by the control measures. The characteristic of each process point will mainly rely with the members with microbiological background. So hazard, a biological, chemical or physical agent in or condition of food with the potential cause and adverse health effect. This is defined by Codex. Biological hazards include bacterial, viral, etheric or parasitic organisms, which I explained before. And chemical hazards include chemicals like mycotoxin from mold, toxic mushrooms, and plant toxins, as well as chemicals added during food production and processing, such as pesticides, additives, and lubricants. Physical hazards include glass, stones, or metal fragments, which I have explained before. 6 categories for risk assessment in conducting hazard analysis. Risk management is a function of probability of an adverse health effect and the severity of an effect consequential to the hazard in food. So, food intends for consumption by at-risk population. This accounts for the risk factors introduced when consumers are very young or old, when their immune system is low or usually susceptible the potential hazards of the evaluated food product. Yeah. Product containing sensitive ingredients. This includes any ingredient which may be a source of hazard or might be a good carrier of microorganisms. For example, eggs, and some people are allergic to peanuts, avocados, carrots, and each and every different kind of sensitive ingredient. No process steps to eliminate hazards. If there are no process steps to eliminate the hazards, then you should not introduce that product to the market. So recontamination potential before packaging, aseptic packaging, or is the potential to control hazards as the as if significantly reduces the potential for recontamination. That is, after packaging, if the product is recontaminated, then you should know exactly that you should make sure that the product doesn't become the same again. That is what is part of the HACCP program. You have to reevaluate all the process that has been going on and then make sure that this doesn't happen again. Potential for product abuse. This applies if there is a real potential for abuse in the product during distribution or consumers handling, which could lead to unsafe product. So no terminal eat process. This is intended to account for ready to eat meals which do not require the eating. So ready to eat meals must be packed very safely with all precautions. If they are not to follow the HACCP program, they can cause food poisoning. So food risk categories are assigned as 1 to 6, with 6 as the highest list foods that fall into this factor, such as infant formulas, baby foods, example, are categorized as 6. Food with none of the risk factors are assigned 0. Foods with one of the risk factors apart from 0 comes under 1. So those with 2 factors after that are category 2, and so on for the categories 3, 4 and 5. So basically it's like 0 to 6, 0 being the least risk and 6 being the high risk factors of food. So food risk categories can also be applicable to ingredients incoming raw materials in processing foods and finished products. They help to identify and classify high hazard foods for microbial hazard but do not aid in chemical or physical hazards or CCPs. CCP is basically critical control point, which I'll be explaining in the next thing. So second principle is to determine critical control points. A critical control point is defined as a point, step, or procedure in a food manufacturing process at which they can control things that is essential to prevent or eliminate food safety hazard or reduce it to an acceptable limit can be applied, and where later processing step won't correct these safety problems. And the third principle is to establish control critical units. Control that is essential to prevent or eliminate food safety hazard or reduce it to an acceptable limit can be applied, and where later processing step won't correct these safety problems. The biological, chemical, or physical risk or hazards can be controlled and usually is related to quality or production issues and not to safety of the products unless the control point support is critical control point. So we know that basically critical control point is a step or a procedure food in a food manufacturing process which eliminates the food safety hazard or reduces it to an acceptable limit, where we can make sure that, for example, you can use a MSG. So MSG, when used at high levels, it might cause cancer. So when used at a limited amount, like below 0.7 grams, they are consumable and they do not cause any effect on the food. So this the critical units are used after hazard analysis has been completed. It is used at the steps where a hazard that must be addressed in the HACCP program has been identified. So principle 3, establish critical unit for each critical control point. A critical limit is defined as the maximum and the minimum value to which a biological, chemical, or physical parameter must be controlled. at a critical control point to prevent, eliminate, or reduce to an acceptable level. The occurrence of a food safety hazard. According to Codex, critical limit is a criterion which separates acceptability from unacceptability, or they are the safety limits that must be met from each control measure at a CCP. Limits may be obtained experimentally from regulatory sources, expert opinions, industry standards, so research studies, equipment manufacturers, and surveys. One defines the critical limits are recorded on HACCP control chart. Once everything is under control, you need to record it record it in a HACCP control chart manual so that they can keep on updating the new products or process that can be helped with another product. So principle 4 is establish monitoring procedures. So monitoring is the measurement or observation required to ensure that the process is under control and operating with defined critical limits. It is the act of conducting a planned sequence of observation or measurement of a control parameter to assert if a CCP is under control. Monitoring services have three purposes. It facilitates tracking of the operation, and it determines where there is a loss of control and deviation occurring at the CCP, for which corrective action must be taken. It provides return documentation for use in verification. So the four types of monitoring procedures that are being used are physical, chemical, microbiological, visual, and sensory. A monitoring procedure may involve online, offline, and observational system. Online is where the critical factors are to be measured during the process continuously. Example, temperature. Offline is where samples are taken and measurement are made later. For example, pH, the acid pH. For example, if you are testing a water, then you need to see if the pH of the water is lower than 6 so that the product is not contaminated. Observational systems, example, confirming that the metal detector will detect metal pieces during checks and automatically reject the product. So because all these mass made products are done in a machine these days, so obviously some part of the metals might scrap into the food product while producing. So you need to confirm with the metal detector to see if there are any metal products in the food. So if there is, you need to reject the product, and if there is not, then you can process the product like usual. The equipment used for monitoring must be accurate, accessible, and easy to use. The frequency of monitoring will depend on the CCP, that is critical control point. The equipments are actually the main product. If you are not using the equipments properly for like even for the online offline observation, for temperature, like while cooking a meat you need to keep on checking the temperature, or for the oil, if the temperature is above or below standard, then the food might get burnt and the insides will not be cooked. So equipments are mostly very important for the monitoring process. And the results of monitoring activities will be recorded by the critical control point monitors. And the fifth principle is establishing corrective action procedures. So corrective actions are actions that are to be taken when monitoring results denote or indicate a loss of control for general sets to any corrective actions that includes identifying the cause of deviation, to determine product disposition and recording the corrective action and re-evaluating the HACCP plan. If a product is not, if a product is like, to be honest, they are not properly handled during manufacturing and distributing, and if it comes in contacts with a bacteria and stuff and gets gets really molded before the validity date, the whole HACCP plan will be re-evaluated and corrected, and so that this problem does not occur again. And so the sixth principle is establishing verification procedures. Verification is done just to ensure that HACCP works and is valid and is relevant. Validation occurs that the program that what it is supposed to do. Information needed to validate a plan includes expert advice, scientific studies, implant observation, measurement, and evaluation. Auditing is a key verification activity and should include inspection of procedures, production records, actions taken, receiving the practices, and procedures used to control critical control points. And the principle 7 is record keeping and documentation product procedures. Documenting procedures. So types of records that well maintained include the HACCP plan, history of amendments of the HACCP plan, and critical control point monitoring records, processing, storage, and distribution records, old trace recall records, audit records, and calibration records. All these records must be maintained regularly so that while re-evaluating, you will know where the mistake has been done and you can correct it according to it. And the legal requirements, that is due diligence. This is the only line of defiance available under the Act of 1990 Food Safety Act. For those who are taken to court as a result of harming someone with the food they sold. If using this defense, proof must be provided that all reasonable precautions were taken to prevent the incident from occurring. In order to prove this, a fully documented food safety system is vital. And documentation required for that is HACCP documentation, which I just told you about, and hygiene regimes, cleaning schedules, records, and analysis of cleaning, staff training records. For an HACCP program to uh, be evaluated thoroughly, all the staffs are being trained according to the procedures of the HACCP, and they are then only allowed to work. So that's why all the hotels or something, or all the manufacturing companies, factories, they give a training period of 6 months to 3 months to 6 months for every employee, and then working practices and company policies on pest control, glass or knives, and everything must be documented for for when the when the consumer is suing you, you need to show all these documents. Control measures and monitoring records of the critical controls. All these records must be complete, accurate, and up to date going back for at least 2 years. So, types of companies using HACCP: primary procedures like fish manufacturers, and processors like food processing companies like milk formulas like uh, Serigram, Cerelac, and processes like that, and caterers and food service operators, and retailers and consumers. So 12 steps for HACCP include assembling an HACCP team, and then describing products and identifying intended use, constructing flow diagram of the product to describe the process steps, and on-site confirmation of the flow diagram, and list of potential hazards associated with each step. Conduct a hazard analysis and consider any measures to control identified hazards, and determine critical control points, and establishing a monitoring system for each critical control point, and establishing corrective actions and verification procedures, and documenting and record keeping. That is, in the 12 steps for HACCP, the the first 5 steps are what are being added extra from the 7 principles. So the next 7 steps are basically the 7 principles of HACCP. So HACCP prerequisites. So good manufacturing products procedures. That is a part of NASA, which was held to find the HACCP program. So prerequisites are practices and conditions which are needed prior to and during the implementation of HACCP, which are essential for food safeties. So prerequisites as a lots of programs that require in a food manufacturing company or any food-based companies. So for premises and facilities, the location is important, the interior, exterior, the access of the premises, employee facilities, cleaning and sanitizing, storage facilities, waste collection, water, ice and steam grounds. All of these are required in for if, for example, in an hotel or a 5-star hotel or a 7-star hotel, all of these will be recorded, and all the employees are trained according to this and to clean and everything. And then the hygiene practices, personal hygiene and practices. So personal training, people are given personal training to if they are a chef, they are supposed to wash their hands regularly for in between 10 minutes gap. And then every employees are trained to overcome a situation when the food is spoiled, or if the food is molded, a bacteria, if there is a bacteria in a food, fungus and everything, they know how to correct these measures. And if the employees have any illness or injuries, they are not supposed to work, and they can have a medical leave. Visitors and company personals are not allowed to come inside the cooking space, because they might have a contamination from outside and it can contaminate the food. And equipment cleaning, sanitizing and cleaning, chemicals, all the chemicals used for cleaning and sanitizing must also be safe for the consumers, because if they are to be in contact with the food and if we have the food, they should not affect our health. And all the areas must be cleaned and sanitized every day, at least 2 times. And for pest control, for most of the food poisonings are caused because of the pests. If the pest control chemicals are not used, the pests don't die. So pest control chemicals must also be cleaned properly after they are applied, and it should not be used anywhere near the cooking space or where the raw materials are being stored. So pest control records are also very important, so that when a consumer is suing you for a food poisoning case, then you can show these records to prove that you are innocent. So for equipment, every equipment must be cleaned after use and sanitized using a sanitizing machine or anything. In hot water, you can sanitize it. So while handling a large quantity of equipments for in an hotels, you need to wash regularly, and if you cannot basically rely on washing other equipments all the time, because in a urgent way, we may not wash it properly. So every equipment will be sanitized before sending it to the consumer, that is why in a warm water, so that the equipment is also fully clean and it might not cause any bacteria to the food, transfer any bacteria to the food. And during transportation, food carriers, like for example in this COVID-19 situation, this has been taken seriously into consideration. So food carriers, temperature controls, receiving and storage, incoming ingredients and packaging, non-food chemicals, finished product storage. So basically, when we buy food from a market or supermarket or any shop, we come home and we clean all the vegetables, fruits, the packets and everything, and then you can store it. That is how you can reduce the transfer of the virus or anything that has been in control contact with the food. So basically when you cook a food in a warm temperature, like 100 degrees Celsius, when you cook it, the bacteria will die off, because the bacteria can only live uh, till 50 degrees Celsius. When it's cooked above that temperature, it will die. So allergen controls. So some people might have allergies to peanuts, eggs, and dairies and everything. So you have to mention in a menu, if you are in the menu or packaging, if you are explaining the ingredients, you have to explain the allergen part separately. If you're allergic to eggs, for example, in a packaging for in a biscuit, if you're allergic to dairy, you have to mention that allergens that might cause poisoning, egg and milk. So that's how people will get to know that these allergen products are there, and then they can avoid using that product. And control of allergens, like special handling, segregate, special sanitizing procedures, rework, proper labeling. That is what I was talking about, proper labeling. If you don't label it, then people will not know that these allergens are come in the product. That is why all the products or packagings have the ingredients list. So quality assurance. So everybody needs a supplier quality assurance. But what we know is we get the products from the supermarket, but they buy it in a wholesale market. So if the products are not in a clean space, the supermarket shouldn't buy it. If they do buy it, we are gonna consume that product and we are gonna make sue the supermarket for it. So the supermarkets make sure that the wholesale product companies are clean and then only approve the procedures. And every once in a while, the government sends people to inspect the companies and factories and hotels for food safety evaluation. And if they don't pass the test, they will not be allowed to continue their manufacturing or hotels. So if the product is not in a proper state, so you have to identify what exactly the problem is, and then trace the problem, and then recall the whole HACCP procedure and try to solve it. That is what is traceability and recall. So in 1971, these were the original HACCP systems. Identify any safety related problem associated with ingredients, process, and product. Determine specific factors that need to be controlled to prevent problems. Establish systems that can measure and document if these factors are being controlled properly. So, the team working. In order to firstly develop and secondly implement a successful food safety system, working in a team and involving people in a company is the best way to go about it. So, company staff have the best information and have a varied product and process knowledge, which is more in depth than any consultants. So, using in house staff makes them feel valued and involved in the process, leading to all an important buy in, essential to the ultimate success of operating the new system. The more in-house staff involved in the process, the better. A cascading of information through the workforce about the HACCP study. What's it for, how is it works, means staff understand why there is a need for it and are more likely to adhere to company regulations as they understand what purpose they serve. Those include in carrying out monitoring are more likely to do so accurately and efficiently for the same reason. So the HACCP team are brought in for food safety system. They are being realistic in size. 4 to 6 members are ideal. However, this number will be reduced for smaller companies. So selecting members according to their role, experience, ability, knowledge, and time available. Ideally, representatives from production, technical, and engineering departments should be on the team. For high-risk foods, a microbiologist would ideally be included to detect all the bacterial in. So, do the team members need to be trained in HACCP? Yeah, they are to be trained for at least 3 to 6 months. Are they the sort of people who will keep other staff informed, leading to this important buy-in from the workforce? They are to be informed because that is what works as a team. Are they available to attend regular meetings, and could one member be responsible for making records of decisions and progress? That is a technical secretary. So the advantages of HACCP is to focus on identifying and preventing hazards from contaminating food. Yeah. Based on sound science, permits more effective and efficient government oversight. So since every food-based factory, hotels or manufacturers have to definitely follow the HACCP according to the government rule, it becomes easier for the governments to give permits by looking at their records. And they, since every year, once in 2 years, they come and inspect, the government comes and inspects the place, there will be no problem in any stages. So places responsible for ensuring food safety on the food manufacturer or the distributor. Helps food companies compete more efficiently in the world market. That is definitely an advantage, and reduces barriers to international way. And the disadvantages of HACCP. increase production and supervisory cost. Since the production is and for supervising you need more manpower, it will be a costly invest, and you need to train the supervisors, managers and production staff, and that will take several months, that is 3 to 6 months. So that is another disadvantage. And the motivation of all, because some people have been um writing duplicate stuff in the record, and they have that's why that is also a disadvantage, because we cannot test everyday process of the HACCP they have been recording, and reduce staff time available for other tasks. when a staff is when the staff is into the HACCP program, they need to make sure everything thoroughly is safe and sound, so that for other tasks they might not have enough time, for example for helping the chef or stuff like that, or in the managing department or marketing stuff. And cost of implementation is also pretty high because it has more staff and manpower, and the machines and everything cost a lot, and the chemicals used for cleaning, sanitizing also cost. Reduced flexibility in production process and introduction of new products. So, the success of HACCP. It includes information of control of foodborne hazards related to all stages in the food chain. HACCP educates and trains the employee to produce safe food, so everyone will know what should be done and what should not be done, and they can also implement that in their daily life. Specific training is given to help them carry out the monitoring of every critical control points. So basically, for the 12 steps of HACCP, if you take it as an example for an orange, you need to assemble an orange production. So first you should assemble an HACCP team, and then you are required to describe the product. For assembling the HACCP team from different departments, like from top management, plus quality and food safety, plus production, plus sales, plus management, plus purchasing. So all these together make an HACCP team. And for describing the product, for example, components and storage conditions, for natural pasteurized orange juice, you need to describe its components, like what are the ingredients. Like, for example, if it's natural pasteurized orange juice, then it's only orange and water. And you have to write orange plus water in the ingredients list, and you have to specify that it's sugar free, and the methods of preservations used. And if you have to store it in a refrigerator in a temperature for 4 to 8 degrees Celsius, or if it can be stored outside in a room temperature. And you need to mention the calorie or milliliter it contains in a box. So that is basically the labeling that you can see in every packaging. And the intended use and consumers, that they drink directly, that if you can drink directly from the bottle, or you have to transfer it to a cup and then drink it. And the user category age for like 2 years, and if it's not recommended for patients with pressure. And the validity of the product, and the expiry date, that is for orange juice is mostly 14 days. And In this 12 steps, we are going to see how an orange juice is being produced. Yeah. First, you have to make sure the receiving of orange, that is receiving of orange, that is from the from the orange tree. You are getting the orange and transporting it to the factory, and there you sort out the orange which are good and which are bad, and then if the orange is bad, they go to the waste, and then washing the orange and then squeezing out. During the squeezing out, all the waste materials like the seeds and the orange peels all go to the waste, and then they are grind and used separately for some other purposes, and then they filter the orange juice, and then they concentrate it so that there's no, the concentration is basically like, you make sure that you eat the orange juice for some time and make sure that all the bacteria are killed and all the microbiological activities are gone, and then you pasteurize the orange juice and then bottle the filling and bottles capping, and then you use x-ray, that is detect if there are any metals in the juice, and then if there are any, they are discarded, and then dating the bottlings, that is labeling the bottles and which date exactly which it was manufactured, and before bottling they are once again filtered, and then packing the bottles with the labeling and stuff, and then arranging on pallets. They arranged and then they store it in a refrigerator, like mass produced refrigerator, and then distribute it to the supermarkets and companies. And during the 7 principles of HACCP, while drawing a flow diagram of the step, identify and list the hazards and specify the control measures. For example, in stage 1, define terms of reference. What product or process is the study going to be carried out on? And a statement that food safety is being considered in relation to physical, chemical, and biological hazards. Whether the product is being judged safe at the point of conception or at the point of manufacture, with clear storage and use instructions so that it's easy for everyone to understand. The term of reference should be kept always simple and generally take less than an space up, less than an A4 page basically. And step 2 is to select the HACCP team bearing in and the criteria detailed. Stage 3 is describing the product being studied. The description should include product composition, product structure, processing, packaging, storage and distribution conditions, and shelf life and instructions for usage for the orange juice which I just mentioned. And stage 4 is to identify the intended use of the product by the customer or consumer. For example, knowing what the customer used the product for, or the consumers use this for drinking or for using it in cakes or something like that. So each and every time it differs. So while constructing a flow diagram, this is an important stage as the rest of the HACCP study will be based on the flow diagram. Each step in the process should be clearly outlined in sequence. All raw materials, packaging, waste, and process should be detailed. Any product recycle or rework loops should be also included. Like for example, for if you're buying a fish, so buying a fish at the market and then transporting it to the factory, and then reception in factory, and then chilled storage, and then while you are packaging, and if you get the order you need to fillet it, skinning it, etc. and then packaging and labeling, and then again you have to chill storage it, and loading vehicles and transporting it to the customer. So now when you take the fish from the chill storage for the first time, and then fillet and skin, and then package and labeling, and then store again, the storage process will be different, because the fish will be packed with air, so that the fish won't be contaminated again, or else the fish will be deg- uh, degraded. Yeah. So the stage 6 is on-site confirmation of the flow diagram. This is where the HACP team take the flow diagram to the factory floor and walk through each stage of it to confirm that it is accurate. The flow diagram should be amended to take account at any differences found. So when if you give the flow diagram to the HACCP team, they will make sure that all these procedures are done correctly, and it is followed each and every time, so that there won't be any differences found, and the there will be no parasites or anything which might be in the product. And stage 7 is listing all potential hazards associated with each process steps, conducting a hazard analysis, and consider any measures to control or identify hazards. The HACCP team should list all potential hazards that may reasonably occur at in each process step. This is where having a good in-depth knowledge of the product and its history is invaluable. The team must determine which hazards are of such nature that their elimination or reduction is acceptable levels is essential to the production of a safe food. And the HACCP team must then consider what control measures, if any, exist, which can be applied for each hazard. Control measures are actions or activities that are required to prevent or eliminate hazards or reduce their occurrence to a safe level. Control measures need to be underpinned by detailed specifications and procedures to ensure their safety implementation. So, identifying a physical hazard: glass, dead insects, splinters of wood, pieces of jewelry, air, splinters of metal, cigarette ends, and then for that, a control measure has been provided. For glass, there is a glass policy. For dead insects, there's a pest control policy or cleaning schedule. And for splinters of wood, there is a wood policy. For pieces of jewelry, there's type hygiene regulations and staff training. That is why nobody, when you are going near the production space, or if a chef was working in a hotel, they are not allowed to wear a earring or a ring, or they are not allowed to wear a nail polish for the safety of the food. And for air, there is staff hygiene regulations. For splinters of metal, there are metal detection or maintenance plans. And cigarette ends, staff hygiene regulations comes in once again. So to identify a chemical hazard and for the control measure, so diesel in fish, that is while in the boat, if the diesel leaks out and it contaminates the fish, control measure is staff training or purchase specification. The the manufacturer should be careful while purchasing the fish. Cleaning chemicals in fish. So for control measures, cleaning schedule, staff training, correct storage of cleaning chemicals, so that they don't get into the fish and degrade the product. And then lubricants used in the factory. So the control measure is purchase of good, safe chemical so that they do not contaminate, like I said before. Over concentration of process chemicals, process specification or staff training. So over concentrated chemicals are probably not used anywhere near the food, They will probably used for cleaning, which while sanitizing again will be gone. So if you don't sanitize the place after chemical cleaning, the food might contaminate the chemical. The chemical might contaminate the food also. So the identified biological hazard is introduction from poor personal hygiene, staff hygiene regulations or staff training is the control measure, and introduction from pest control policy is always a must. Introduction from dirty equipments and surfaces. So cleaning schedule is in the control so that all the equipments are clean and safe. Multiplication from poor time and temperature control. Chill storage, product specifications, staff training. So the poor time and temperature control is there is a temperature point for which food has to be stored. They cannot be stored in room temperatures. That is why we always refrigerate the food after it's cooled down so that the temperature doesn't get mixed up. And if a food is hot and suddenly cooled within a minute, the food might contaminate because of the sudden temperature difference. Cross contamination from raw to cooked food. Strict separation of raw and cooked food must be followed so that the bacteria from the raw food does not stick onto the cooked food. So mostly in hotels they have a separate refrigerator for cooked and raw foods. So but if they don't follow that policy, and if the inspection team comes and evaluates, suddenly they will be caught and the hotel will be seized, or they will be given a specific time to rectify themselves. And the critical control points, this is any step in the food process which, when controlled, will either eliminate or prevent the hazard from occurring. And the decision a decision tree is a sequence of questions which are applied to each process steps when a potential hazard has been identified. The answers to the question which will establish whether any process steps are critical control points. Are control measures used to prevent the hazard? Yes. Does the process step eliminate or reduce the hazard to an acceptable level? Yes. Modify the is if the control measures used to prevent the hazard is no, it will be modified again, not a CCP process to next process to step. Will a latest process step eliminate or reduce the hazard to an acceptable level? Probably, yeah. So critical limits must be clearly defined and usually consist of things which are easy to measure. Some examples of measurement include temperatures, bacterial loads, cooking times, soil percentages, and bone lengths. So within each critical limit, there will be a target, which is an ideal figure at which the control measures should be operating. For example, if there is a CCP on a temperature control of fresh fish, the ideal figure or optimum temperature the fish should be held at would be 0 degrees Celsius. This would be the target within the critical limits. However, it is unlikely that the fish could be held at 0 degrees Celsius without the temperature fluctuating. So a tolerance is built in to accommodate these fluctuations. For example, minus 1 degree Celsius to plus 4 degrees Celsius could be a tolerance within the critical limits. Even if the fish deviated from 0 degree, as long as it is within the tolerance set, it will be safe to eat. The upper limit of tolerance plus 4 degrees Celsius is the critical limit, and in this case must not be exceeded. So that the tolerance level of the fish is not uh, so that the tolerance level of the fish is low, I when it's above 4 degrees Celsius. Sometimes the target and tolerance are the same figures, as there is no safe level of a particular hazard contained within the food. Very often, the critical limit will be zero or complete absence. For examples, this would be case when considering glass contamination or some forms of chemical contamination. If the tolerances are breached, the critical limits will have been exceeded and the food will be deemed unsafe to eat. It is therefore important to think carefully when setting the critical limits. If they are too tight, then it is unlikely that they will be continuously breached and are therefore unworkable. If they are too close, too loose, they become meaningless and may not ensure the safety of the food. The critical limits can be reviewed and adjusted at any time, particularly when the HACCP system is reviewed or if there has been some kind of food poisoning incident linked to the product. So, when establishing out the control measure will be monitored, it is important to think of who will carry out the monitoring. Online staff, quality staff, engineers note this in the procedure. So, frequency of the monitoring. How often does the monitoring need to be carried out? Do you need to know the situation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or less frequent checks sufficient? What will be done? Is this a temperature check, a metal check, a hygiene swab, a bone check? So, monitoring will also help to identify the possibility of the CCP going out of control. If the monitoring shows the figures creeping towards the outer limit of the tolerances, then it could be an indication of the CCP going out of control, especially if this is unusual. The experience of the monitoring staff together with their training would enable them to raise an alert and avert a potential breach of the CCP. And monitoring documentation forms a vital part of the HACCP system. It goes without saying that these documents should be completed accurately and timingly by a trained CCP monitor. They are essential when investigating breakdowns in hygiene, including customer complaints and food poisoning. They also play a vital role in a successful due diligence defense. So, establishing corrective actions, that is principle 5. So, corrective actions are the sequence of events that must be carried out when the monitoring shows that the critical limits have been breached. At this point, the food will be deemed unsafe to eat and therefore must be removed from production or stock and may have to be destroyed. Corrective actions will restore control. In order to establish what corrective actions must be undertaken, thoughts need to be given to what to do immediately. Follow-up actions are also required in order to prevent the likelihood of this type of incident occurring again. So intermediate actions could include like stopping the production, quarantining after affected products, cleaning the affected area, removing equipment from the area, icing product, informing management. So follow-up actions could include after the immediate actions are conducted. The follow-up actions are rechecking additional batches of products. So if one products are infected, the others might also be infected. So we need to recheck every product and retraining or disciplining staff. We have to retrain the staff that this doesn't happen again and review the procedures from the start. And if the equipment is repaired, you have to check it again and disposing or downgrading of product. And if nothing can be done with the product, they are to be disposed. It is important that all staff are made aware of the existence of corrective team actions, particularly if they are working in a CCP area. Then they will then know what to do in the event of the critical limits and won't have to come up with their own plan. Each time a corrective action is implemented, it should be recorded and signed off by management. These records will provide vital information when the HACP system is reviewed, whether or not the critical limits Set are too tight, too loose, or just right. And thus, that will be the end of today's program. Thank you for helping me and being cooperative.
Thank you, Ms. Preetha. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat box. Participants, if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat box. The feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Participants can fill the feedback form, and if any no questions further, can kindly exit the room. Participants kindly fill the feedback form and then exit the room. Feedback form will not be sent to any participant's email ID for any reason. Preetha, thank you
Yeah.
for the wonderful session. On behalf of Tourism and Travel Management Department of Dwarakadas Govardandas Vaishnav College, uh, we thank you for the time taken by you to prepare such nice presentation. If any questions posted, we'll let you know through mail.
Thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity. Now, can I exit?
Yes, yes. The feedback link has been posted in the chat box. Participants kindly fill the feedback link and you may exit. If any question, kindly post in the chat box, which will be forwarded to Ms. Preetha, and answers will reach you soon. The room will be open for another 10 minutes. Kindly fill the feedback form.